All right, how's everybody doing? Everybody dry? Everybody's good? Hey, this is awesome. I'm so glad that you decided, to brave the rain. We're making this work, and can you just say thank you for all of our team members that just made this happen, setting up the tents? Miriam, you guys did a phenomenal job. Man, that brought me back to growing up in the church. Anybody grew up in the church? Few of you? Yeah, I grew up in the church, and that was one of our staple songs that we sang a lot. If you didn't, you probably didn't recognize that, but an amazing song. Just the words are so simple, but yet just really spoke to me. I hope they spoke to you this morning. But my name's Tony. I get to be the pastor here at Cornerstone. I see a lot of new faces, a lot of people visiting. We're so glad that you jumped in with us and joined us today. Man, it's already been a good morning despite the rain, but it's going to continue to be a good morning. And hey, Rick pointed out something that was so true, is I'm just so glad it's not 95 out and we're all boiling in the heat. So I'll take this any day of the week. This is going to be kind of a pretty abbreviated service than what some of you might be normally used to. If you don't know where we meet, we've been meeting this past year at Regal Cinema every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. to worship together. And if you don't have a community, a home church, we would love for you to join us, check things out. But this is kind of scaled back, a little bit more laid back, so a little bit of shorter message. Some of you saying, thank God, because I'm so hungry. Good news is we've got food already starting cooking. Dan's back there on the grill, and I heard he did a few pork butts. So I'm super pumped about that as well. There's moments. I have 4 kids and 2 girls that are head off to college soon, 2 boys. And there's just moments. You ever have those moments if you have children where it's like proud dad moment, proud mom moment, where your kid does something that just kind of surprises you a little bit that you didn't expect, but you're like, wow, that's awesome. So glad they did that. So I've had a few of those, and don't want to speak into all those this morning because of the sake of time, but so I'm just going to pick on my son, Micah, for a moment, and hopefully this doesn't embarrass him too much. He's got all his buddies here, so you got the support. And that's just what happens, like as a pastor's kid. Sometimes your parent, if your dad's a pastor, you end up being a sermon illustration. So love you, buddy. So all summer, Micah's been kind of wrestling with, what do I do this fall in terms of sport? Because he loves sports, absolutely loves sports. Baseball is like his sport, probably be his number one sport. And then he'll be out doing anything, basketball, football. He's tried golf. And so we talked about him really wanting to try football. And so we were having this conversation, and we didn't think it would pan out. And then, a couple of weeks ago, the conversation started back up again. It's like the interest in playing football. And so we're thinking, is this wise? He's a little bit smaller. He's going to be playing, JV football. He's never played contact football before, but knows the sport so well. And he talked to us, and he really wanted to give it a shot. And so to his credit, he's trying out this week. But something, as a part of the conversation that we had, he said something along the lines of, Dad, I just know that if I don't try this, I'm going to regret it later. And I know it's going to be hard, and I know it's going to be challenging. In fact, the first few days have been grueling. They've been out in the heat, the 90, 95-degree heat, and one day they got absolutely, completely soaked, and they're just getting started. I mean, Caleb, where's Caleb at? You just graduated from Albemarle High School. You know how hard football is and how grueling it can be, and the practices and all that's involved. And those of you who are involved in sports know that there are some challenges along the way, that it isn't just the games where you see what's going on in the games. It's all the beforehand and all the challenges. And so I'm excited for my son in that sense that he's going to get to play football. But what I'm even more excited about is what it's going to develop in him. And trying something and doing something that is beyond himself, that's going to get hard. It's going to get difficult. He's going to struggle. I know that. But he's willing and he's ready. And so I just want to speak into that for a moment, because I think I'm just stating the obvious. For those of us who say, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus this morning, and some of you may not be, we're so glad that you're here. But if you are, somewhere along the journey, you're going to come to a place where you say, you know what, Tony? Following Jesus is really hard. Following Jesus is not easy. Being a disciple, being a follower of Jesus is difficult. It's one of those things that maybe many of you discovered if you're if you're new to faith. Maybe there's some times where you've like, man, I just wanted to give up. Like, even going through COVID and what we've been through, it's like, is this really worth it? Following Jesus, all the things that we're seeing in this world, all the brokenness. Like, God, what are you up to? Do you even have a plan? Do you even care about my life? And what we found is like, yeah, following Jesus is awesome. Being a Christian is awesome, but there's a cost. And in those moments, your response will determine whether you are a consumer or a follower. See, a consumer is somebody who is looking to Jesus for what he can do for you, to maybe help you with your job, to help you with your finances, to help you at work, your marriage, relationships, your family, your health, your future, and your situation. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. In fact, we read throughout the scriptures, that can be really good. In fact, that's how Jesus connected with people and how he reached with people. He taught them. He met with them on their level. He cast demons out. He performed miracles. He fed them. All right, the feeding of the 5,000, amazing miracle. He took care of them. He turned water into wine. Seriously, how cool is that? Turning water into wine. Are you serious? Like, that's amazing. And so I think there's this attractional element where people who are nothing like Jesus liked Jesus. They liked to hang out with him. And so somewhere along the way, though, Jesus says, hey, that's great, and I'm glad you could experience that, and I'm so glad that I can help you along the journey, but you got to come and follow me. And just like in his day, when he walked the earth, there were consumers and there were followers. And the same is true in our day today. There are consumers who just stay consumers. I'm just going to consume whatever I can get out of this faith thing. And then there are others that are willing to say, okay, I'm willing to do the hard work. I'm willing to dig in. I'm willing to do whatever Jesus wants me to do. But I think the tension is we're great at consuming things, right? Did you know this? Like, this is crazy. But the United States has up to 50,000 storage facilities. That's more than 5 times the number of Starbucks that we have in the United States. Currently, there are 7.3 square feet. I don't know who did this math, but it's kind of funny to me. There's 7.3 square feet of self-storage space for every man, woman, and child in the nation. Thus, it is physically possible that every American could stand all at the same time under the total canopy of a self-storage roofing entirely. All right, so that's how good we are at consuming and having stuff and owning things. Now, if I could just be perfectly honest with you, like, I've struggled with both. At times, I feel like I'm just consuming when it comes to faith, and other times, I feel like I'm following. But what I've learned along the way is that when you become a follower of Jesus, it is, and this is where I want to just kind of speak into, and for some it's going to be a reminder, for others it's going to be this realization, and I hope God is speaking into all of our hearts this morning, because somewhere along the way, following Jesus is going to cost you something. And I think it's recognizing, like, hey, if I'm following Jesus, the new me is here. I'm willing, ready, and able, recognizing there is a cost. And that might sound a little dismal and depressing, but what I want you to understand this morning, especially as we're going to have a conversation in a moment and experience baptisms together, is that it's worth it. Now, salvation is free. Salvation is a grace. It is offered. It will cost you nothing. It costs us nothing. But following Jesus is going to cost us something. And often we don't see the return right away, right? Why even follow? Why even go that route? Why we follow Jesus? Well, Jesus says something in Mark chapter 8, verse 34. He says this. He called the crowd together to him along with his disciples. He says, whoever wants to be my disciple, he says this, must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. So what he's saying to us, he's saying to his followers, look, a disciple of me, if you're following me, is you're not a consumer. A disciple is a follower. In other words, where I go, you go. You follow me. What I do, you do. What I say, I will do. And Jesus, I'm fully behind you wherever you lead in my life. And Jesus wants them to understand at some point, you're going to have to make a decision to say no to whatever that might be that is enticing you and saying yes to me. See, the cross, as we all know, is a symbol. And for them and the disciples at the time, it was scary. It was horrific. The Romans used crucifixion and reserved it for like the worst of the worst. And it was like the worst punishment imaginable. So for them, like when you say, Jesus, take up your cross, like it's like, what are you saying? Jesus is saying there's this sense to which you are figuratively, but also literally, for them, willing to die for me. And if they were surprised, shocked by what Jesus said earlier, can you imagine what is running through their brains now? Like deny, take up a cross. But the good thing is like Jesus doesn't leave us hanging. He doesn't leave them hanging because they might be a little confused and freaked out. Like this whole conversation around a cross, like take up your cross, follow me. Like, what are you talking about? And so before you run back home, you run away, lean in, because he says this to them. For whoever wants to save their life, this was so them at the time, by the way. And this is so us. We're all about safety. We're all about saving our lives. And there's nothing entirely wrong about that, but I think it's a matter of perspective. Because it doesn't matter how long you try, we know this, right? It doesn't matter how long you try to prolong your life. At some point, we're all going to die. Welcome to Cornerstone Community Church. So glad that you came here this morning. Not here to depress you. I know it's raining, but we're going to be okay this morning. But whether it's an accident or unplanned or it's just through natural causes, everybody admits, like, I want to save my life. I want to prolong my life. But at some point, we're going to lose it. And so Jesus says, verse 35, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit to lose or to trade or to give up their soul? Jesus is saying, look, church, think about this with me. If you believe that there is more to this life, something that is beyond this life, then the last thing you want to do is do something in this life that would forfeit what's going to happen on the other side. Salvation, again, is free. It will cost you nothing, but following Jesus is going to cost us something. So I don't know what it's going to be for you, and it's not just a one-time thing. This is going to be like a you and God moment. Because everybody's story is different and everybody's situation is different. And we're not here to judge like who's a better follower of Jesus and who's sacrificing more. Because that just gets ridiculous. And then we begin to judge and then that just kind of disunifies the local body. But this is going to be a you and God moment where you know in your heart, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what God is inviting me into. This isn't for anybody else except you. And I was having one of those conversations, and I won't go into detail, but having one of those conversations with my daughter, Abby. Like, this is between you and God, and you are going to have to figure this out and seek Him in the decision that you want to make with Him as He guides you. And others might not understand. Young people, students, I see you all in the back, peanut gallery. Like, others might not understand why you're a Jesus follower. Others might not understand why you're a Jesus follower. They might think you're crazy. They might think you're weird. And there's things that you might have to give up. And you don't have to be weird to be a follower of Jesus. You can still be a nice person, build friendships, and make an impact. But when others find out, they may put you down. They may make fun of you. And there might be times where you have to make sacrifices for your faith, like getting out of that relationship or staying in that relationship or forgiving that person or taking that job or walking away from that job or taking that risk. And guess what? God may not bless you for it, at least initially. This is not a health and wealth sermon where I start preaching and saying, well, you just do God's will and everything's going to work out and you're going to get the money and everything that you've been longing for, God's going to provide that. That's not the gospel. We may get to this place where it's like, you know what? I followed and I obeyed, but I'm not going to see the reward on this side of eternity. Look at all the disciples and followers of Jesus. A lot of them were martyred because of their faith, okay? But deep down in your heart, you will know it was the right time and the thing to do because you love Jesus and you've denied yourself and you've taken up your cross. And sometimes it's going to feel like a death and sometimes it's going to feel like a loss. But I'm telling you, when we make those decisions, anytime we choose to follow Jesus, eventually he gives us peace. A peace that I can't fully describe for you this morning, but he gives us peace. And at the end of the day, we're not fans. We're not spectators. We're not users. We don't just sit and consuming. There are things where you're going to have to die to self and decisions that you're going to make. And somewhere along the way, it's going to feel like a nudge. And it may affect your reputation. It may impact your family. It may negatively impact your finances, your comfort. But if you decide to take that next step in obedience, whatever it is, like it's going to cost you something. And again, there may not be blessing. There may not be repayment. And you may be tempted to say, no. I want to save this life. I want to live for me. God, I have my plans. I have my stuff. I have my agenda. Me. But everybody dies of something. But here's the thing. You could die for something that matters way beyond yourself. To live in such a way where your life could be used for eternal impact. And ultimately, isn't that what Jesus did for us? He paid the ultimate price. He didn't come here to earth to live for himself and say, look at me, I'm king. Everybody do my bidding. No, he came and gave his life as anybody know? As a ransom for many. I didn't come to be served. I came to, Jesus said, to serve. And Jesus wants you to know, hey, if we're willing and we're willing to surrender and we're willing to say yes, one day you'll be glad you did. And so that just kind of speaks into what we're going to do in a moment, baptism, because at the end of the day, everybody here has a next step. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, we all have next steps. We all have choices that we make. And if you're a follower of Jesus and you've said, you know what, I've given my life to Christ, I love the Lord, I want to choose him to follow him for the rest of my days, then your next step is baptism. Well, why do we say that? Well, because of what Rick read earlier. He said to go into all the nations, Jesus said this, and go into all the nations and baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. And so he set the pace and the example, do as I have done. And this symbolizes and shows that the story of Jesus and the story of a person's salvation is not to save a person. So baptized doesn't save you. It's not this magical event where it's like you go under the water and then all of a sudden everything changes for your life. No, this is a moment of surrender and obedience saying hey, it symbolizes when I go under the water, I am dying to self. I'm not living for me anymore, as hard as that can be sometimes, because I'll admit I live for self. I had a moment last night. I met Marlene. I was in Walmart parking lot, and I was buying that tent right there. I was tired, didn't want to be out, and I don't say this to boast. I'm just kind of sharing a struggle that I had, if I can be transparent. And Marlene comes up to me. She says, hey, do you have jumper cables? And I'm like, yeah, I think I got some. And so I go over, try to jump her car. It's taken 30 minutes. I'm like, I'm tired, sweaty. I just want to go home. I've got to preach the next day and get everything set up, and I'm just ready to go home. And she's talking and trying to strike up conversation, and here I am just trying to focus on self and get this job done and be the nice guy, I guess. I don't know. So 30 minutes go past. Can't get her car started. Find out she's homeless. She's living out of her car. Lost her 2 sons in a car accident. Husband died. Now, this happened several years ago, but she's alone. Veteran of war. Living out of her car. And I'm like, all right. And then God nudges, and these are the nudges that I'm talking about. He says, you need to go into Walmart and buy her a battery, because that battery is shot. Not going to do anything. So I have one of these moments, go in, get her all set up, get her a battery, and man, her face just lit up, and then found out later on that I was a pastor, and she just talked about how God has made an impact in her life, and that this just really spoke to her that God has a plan. She said that. And here I am, like, just frustrated, not wanting to be there, tired, and ready just to go home. And God was saying, no, Tony, you've got to die to self. I don't care if you're a pastor or not. You've got to die to self to serve me. And so I share that story again, not to boast, but it was a teaching moment for me to say, am I this? Am I willing? Everybody clench your fists like this. We've done this before, but clench your fist as hard as you can. Just hard as you can. Hold it right there. Just keep clenching your fist. Okay? Keep going. As hard as you can. Okay? This isn't the greatest feeling. Imagine walking around like this. Hold your fist tight. Walking around like this all the time. At work, at school. Like just clenching your fist. Keep going. As hard as you can. All right? Is this a good feeling? Like, for me, this seems very restrictive. In fact, it's starting to hurt a little bit. Now, slowly let go. Feel the blood rushing back into your hand? Isn't that weird? Listen, that's what God wants to do for you in the spiritual sense. Like, He wants His Spirit to flow through you so that you're ready to say yes at any point. And so these young people who are being baptized this morning, what they're saying and communicating to you is a couple of things. First of all, that I'm going public with my faith. I am saying yes to Jesus. He is my Savior. He is my Lord. And I want to serve Him all the days of my life. But here's another thing that they're saying, and it's to all of you. We don't do baptisms privately, and here's why. Because they need your help. If we're disciples of Jesus, we need community to help one another. Would anybody be willing to admit this morning that I need help along the way with my faith journey? Anybody? Okay, yeah. We all do. We all need that support. We all need that love. We all need that care. And listen, these young people, they need your help. They need your support. They need prayer because they're walking into some... School's starting, by the way, guys. Did you know that? A few weeks. I'm sorry to bring that up, but hey, just enjoy these last few weeks while they last, because school's going to be starting up, and it's going to get hard. You know, going to camp is easy, right? We're around our believers, and going to places like this in church and around believers, and we can eat, and we can celebrate, and this is so cool, and we need this. We need groups, all of that. But when we go back to work and we go back to school, Jesus is saying to us this morning, like, it's going to cost you. Are you going to be a consumer or are you going to be a follower? Are you willing to die to self? And so that's the challenge that I want to offer all of you this morning, is that as we approach this new rhythm this fall, are you willing to die to self, to take up your cross, to follow Him, whatever that means, even if it costs you something? And He promises something. He promises that I'm going to be with you. And listen, that's enough. That's worth more than anything else on this earth. That is enough, that Jesus goes with us. And He promises this. Scripture teaches, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I see you guys back there. Well done. It's awesome.